Welcome to Acclime Conversations, a thought leadership series about business in Vietnam, delving into the most pressing matters for international investors that are active and have operations in the Vietnamese economy. Today, we have the pleasure of having with us Mr. DC Lim, who is the country head commercial banking at UOB Vietnam. DC has a significant experience in the Vietnamese context and as well regional context when looking at FDI, looking at commercial green growth and as well sustainability. The role for this discussion is to understand a bit more of where Vietnam sits within the transformation of their economy into the green area, into the sustainable zone. And that's why we invited DC to discuss with us and understand a bit more about what's UOB perspective into this space. So welcome, DC, to Acclime Conversations.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity.
You have some significant experience within the region as well in Malaysia, in Singapore, and in Taiwan, and you've been covering the commercial department in these countries. I think one of my first questions will be about the ASEAN opportunity, about UOB's footprint in ASEAN, and how do you see the cross-border investments within the region, and how does UOB support investors to create value and to leverage some of these opportunities cross-border in this region?
Sure. So if we look at ASEAN as a trading bloc, as an economy, right, it is basically one of the top 3 biggest economy in the world. Within ASEAN, the countries are able to trade barrier-free, no tariffs whatsoever. Outside of ASEAN, we also start to realize that there is a significant trade flow between ASEAN and Greater China. So that is where the bank basically position ourselves, entrench ourselves deeply into ASEAN to facilitate intra-ASEAN flow, and for outside ASEAN, one of the key focus is towards the Greater China side. Obviously, the other key markets like the Europe, the Americas, these are where we have our presence to facilitate the flows, but and the volume is there. But we see the trend. The trend is this big shift of FDIs coming into ASEAN region. And of course, the trade flows as well. So UOB is in this very unique position where we have all these years, we are like 83 years old now, and all these years we have been basically entrenched ourselves as an ASEAN bank. Okay, we never tried to call ourselves a global bank. We always call ourselves a regional bank, and we are one of the few regional bank that has a AA rating, that has got significant presence in every ASEAN countries, and that has enabled us to compete almost directly with any major local bank in any of these ASEAN countries. Yeah. So as for all these burgeoning trade flows, FDIs that's coming in, we realize that Vietnam is really at the forefront, especially over the last maybe 5-10 years, that is attracting all the money that's coming in. And one of the key reasons that Vietnam is being advantageous now is because it is standing between the US and the China,
right between giants,
right in the middle of these 2 giants, and whatever risk aspects that the businesses are sensing, everybody starts to de-risk into Vietnam or ASEAN in general. And so, I mean, in a way now, the whole trade flows, the whole FDI trends is very clear. ASEAN versus the rest of the world, and within this rest of the world that's coming in, we are seeing huge amounts coming from Americas, from Greater China. Yeah, so that's where we are now.
Mm-hmm. And from the ASEAN regional perspective, going in more into depth into Vietnam, you've been in Vietnam for close to a year already.
Yeah,
and obviously still learning and understanding the complexities of the Vietnamese environment. But in this 1 year, just being involved in investors looking into the Vietnamese space, what are some of the differences from a unique kind of selling point perspective of Vietnam versus other jurisdictions in ASEAN you observed from a commercial and from an opportunity perspective?
So the interesting part about the Vietnam market versus the rest of the ASEAN country is actually the language. The language presents itself the opportunity as well as the challenges for any investors who are trying to come, right? So the language itself is a huge barrier for any investors who wants to do business with Vietnam. So that means that they need help when they come into Vietnam. The investors are much more dependent on professionals like yourself, Acclime, or a bank like myself, to provide all the necessary advice for them to operate in a safe way. So Vietnam being that being the language side of it, the vast amount of business opportunities that's coming out, right? The fast growing economy, So everybody out there who is looking at Vietnam and say that this is a market that I cannot miss. I really cannot miss. I look at the history, I look at where the economy is, and I look at the global geopolitical tension trends, and I realize that I cannot miss Vietnam. So they are investors who are queuing to come into Vietnam. Yeah. And then that's where you and I, we really are in a very advantageous position where we have been operating here for years. We have the right talent in our organization to be able to serve all these investors coming in. I see. So the uniqueness of Vietnam to me is in a way that for, let's say, UOB, we are in a natural position to serve the incoming investors. So I do not need to, like in a Malaysia or in your Indonesia situation, to go out and find customers so desperately by spending a lot on marketing, by spending a lot on partnerships. Here, we are a small setup, but through finding the right partners, through talking to the right people, we will be able to link to the right type of customers who will see, say, UOB as a good banking partner to work with. So that to me is the uniqueness of Vietnam. Yeah. So like for example, with five branches now after acquiring Citibank. Before that we were 3 branches, and we are fighting head on with the local banks here. Yeah, but we are not fighting in the exact same local context. We are very, very much established in helping customers that are coming in. So almost 80% of my customers are actually on a cross-border basis. So that's the uniqueness of here. But when I was looking in Malaysia, right,
it was more about the domestic market.
Yeah, exactly. 80% of the customers there were actually the locals. Right. Yeah. Same for our franchise in Thailand and Indonesia. Most of the customers are actually the locals. So that's the uniqueness you're talking about.
And that's where the difference, the variation of the level of service and the support function for these investors, where in Malaysia you have the domestic economy that already understands how things work and how the complex is the environment, and they will have specific needs, versus Vietnam, where you have new investors entering the market and they will seek protection, they will seek support.
Exactly.
And they will need this completely different level of assistance and capabilities from either treasury side or from the consulting or business side.
Exactly. The advisory aspect of our service is more appreciated by the customer. In other countries, they probably go to a bank knowing a customer go to a bank already knowing what they want. Okay, because I know the systems, I know the regulatory framework. So I go to the bank, I know this is the account, this is the type of account I want to serve my need. But here, they literally come to us and say, what account do I need? Right. So we say, okay, first of all, is it a direct investment or is it an indirect investment? Right. Or are you going to do it on a pure foreign entity basis? In that case, you've got to do a foreign account. So that's usually how we start the conversation. It's really advisory. Yeah. So that's very interesting.
And then you get to the key questions. How do I send the money in? And
exactly.
How do I send the money out? And how do I enable that protection for my investment in country?
Correct.
And so on and so forth.
So anything that touches money, I expect my team to be very well versed and confident enough to be able to engage new investors coming in. But anything that goes into the technical aspect, that's where we will have to come to law firms or corporate advisory firms like yourself to have more in-depth conversation with the customer that really do the execution. Yeah. But through our own network of franchise, UOB franchise, that in itself is already generating quite a number of inflows, inward potential customers to ourselves. Yeah. And I just feel that, being here this 1.5 years, my role is quite different. My role is actually quite different from what I personally experienced in Malaysia, running the Malaysia commercial business. Very different.
Yeah. You mentioned before about the Vietnamese opportunity and as well the complexity of the business environment. From a growth and opportunity perspective, and also kind of an economic status of where we sit. The first half of the year was from a numbers perspective, from the Vietnamese economy context, clocking really well, really strong. However, the general investor perspective is more cautious, more moderate in that. Where is Vietnam sitting now? What's your view from UOB's perspective and your insights and analysis on 2024 as a year for growth in Vietnam, and specifically on the second half or end of the year? What should we expect?
Honestly, I'm not that much into all the technical week on week, month on month kind of a statistical number movements. What I'm always more concerned about as a commercial banker is the long-term trends that is forming for this economy. Whether this year Vietnam will end up at 5.8% or 6.5%, to me there's really no difference. The fact is Vietnam has been growing over the past 20 years at an average of 6%. These kind of big trend numbers are what is...
And the consistency of keeping it.
Yeah, correct. I mean, this year, for whatever that's being mentioned by all the economists around the world, it's going to be around 6%, plus minus. To me, there's really no difference between a 6.2 or 6 or 5.8, because the underlying economy is continuing to do well. And that is attracting a lot of investors and traders coming in to find businesses to trade with. Vietnam is a very amazing story. I mean, you look back into the history of Vietnam, right? It was basically disadvantaged by almost 30 years post-World War II, right? Compared to the rest of the major ASEAN markets in terms of economic development. This 30 years after World War II, we started off with the Civil War, and then we had the Vietnam War that was led by the US. So that basically only ended in 1975. And it's from there on that Vietnam is like really kind of started, right, to catch up with the Malaysia that has a 30-year head start, with the Philippines, with the Indonesia, with Thailand. But look at where Vietnam is now. Vietnam's economic GDP has already caught up with Malaysia and Philippines, right? Slightly different in terms of population profile, but Philippines is slightly closer, right? About 115 million population. Vietnam is 100, yeah. But look at where we are, growing at 6% per annum and catching up at where we, in terms of the GDP right now. It's a very amazing growth story, yeah. And if you look deeper, you realize that Vietnam has a lot of advantage in terms of natural resources, like young talent pool, the real hardworking people that can really fight the war, and then now is trying to win the economy. So it's, in many aspects, when I first reached Vietnam and I look at all this history, I really respect this country. And one other key factor that definitely is deserving to mention is the economic stability. Among all the countries, the major ones, the other country that is as stable as Vietnam over the past 60 years is basically Malaysia, right? But even Malaysia itself kind of tricked themselves a little bit in the past few years. But I mean, the uniqueness of the political system here essentially proved that it is working. Yeah. The centralized power creates both the usual, right? A lot of advantage, opportunities for them to move faster, decide faster, grow faster, align faster. But it also subject to a lot of abuses, which is natural in every other country. Yeah. So I think over the last 2-3 years, we've been observing that there's a significant amount of political will to make sure that the whole economy grow at a more sustainable right direction. And we are seeing that the outcome of all this effort on a daily basis recently. Right?
Yeah.
With the political top echelon changes and all.
Yeah. One thing interesting that you mentioned just now about the respect we see as well for long-term investors that are developing a clear understanding of the Vietnamese context, business and as well socially. All of them, they have this internal kind of mindset of respect within doing business in Vietnam when they reach that level of understanding of what's really happening and how things are evolving and the opportunities. So it's not just about the profitability function or the opportunity function, but it's really understanding the people and bringing that sustainability inside that whole concept of doing business sustainable.
Yeah. So in this respect, I feel that the political will to say set Vietnam onto a net zero by 2050, this comes in very clearly to me, right? It is now driven at the very top of the government, all the way filtering down to corporates, right? Through policies and process changes that they have been constantly issuing new decree every other month. Yeah. So we are seeing a very clear direction, and that makes working or investing in Vietnam somewhat more certain. As an investor, I come in, I say, at least there's one thing I'm not too worried, which is the political stability. Here, it will be stable. And so far from history, we look at it, okay, whatever the government say they will do, it seems like it is going in this direction. And then with the geopolitical wind that is blowing, well, that's where we're seeing now, right? The amazing amount of investments, record-breaking year after year, the amazing amount of export trade surplus, record-breaking year after year. And I just can't help to think that it's probably going to continue for at least the next 3 to 5 years.
Right. Some would say 10 years plus within a very stable projection of growth. But let's see how that goes. You mentioned the history of growth of Vietnam, and as well, UOB was part of for the last 30 years of this growth in the Vietnamese context by being part of the economy.
Yes.
Can you share a bit the story of where kind of UOB fits in, and as well some of the core value proposition principles of where UOB stands to enable investors to gain value here in the Vietnamese context?
So the story of UOB with Vietnam started about 31 years ago as a rep office. And if we look at, let's say from Singapore's perspective, the other two big banks, they were not so tuned towards Vietnam yet, but we were already here, started with a rep office. And when we were subsidiarized, one of the first initiatives we took was actually to reach out to the government and actually propose a collaboration in terms of jointly attracting FDIs into Vietnam. So we were one of the first foreign banks to sign some kind of MOU in collaboration with the government to bring in the foreign investors. Since then, we never looked back, right? Since then, the bank even set up a dedicated FDI advisory unit in Vietnam to provide those bigger corporates. To be fair, it's always the bigger corporates that gets more attention, bespoke attention. And we have been helping those companies come in, settle down, do business. That's one of the effort that the bank has additionally put in than just to talk about, say, we want to do business here. And we start doing business like any other bank here, fighting for the local corporates. We were from day one very clear. Our role here is to help investors to come in. And recently, with the trend becoming even more clear, with so much more investments are flowing in, we are also sitting in the ship that's rising together with the tide. Yeah, enjoying much more businesses recently.
Let's talk a bit about on the sustainability side. Why is this important for UOB, and what type of functions of support for FDIs that are looking at sustainable growth, green growth, and as well financing? That is the key part of this sustainable growth.
On sustainability, this is where I think it is such a mega trend that no one, not even as an individual, will not be aware. Basically, what I'm saying is, as a bank, we were also quite tuned to it fairly early in terms of trying to do something about it. So as a bank, we also committed to net zero by 2050. we committed to help our existing lending customers in 6 key sectors to decarbonize, and we set targets among them, set targets and measure ourselves against all the customers' carbon footprint. So far, it has been pretty interesting. We set a target, and then we realized that the carbon footprint actually gone below what we set for ourselves. So we are ahead of our own target. So what is the bank? What is the role of the bank? First of all, I think there is a lot of interest in terms of green financing lately. So green financing is really nothing more than using the money. It's actually normal money, for green related purposes. And this movement, this channeling of funds from your pocket, from every investor to the right green project is where the bank's role can play a very important role.
Into identifying as well.
Exactly. So identifying and as well as to measure, track, and to ensure that there's this thing worry about greenwashing. To ensure that it doesn't turn out to be a not so green project, as stated in the original prospectus. So the bank's role is really about moving the funds to the right project. When we talk about sustainability project, green project. So the other interesting question is, a lot of people ask me, is it easier for corporates to get a green loan? My answer is usually that it is actually the opposite. To get a green loan, you first of all have to satisfy that you are a viable project, and then you have to satisfy that you are actually green, through all the certification. And after that, the yearly annual review is not only about the viability of your company, it also, are you continuing to be green? So all this adds up to the complication when we talk about green financing. And the banks out there, many of them claim that they are already able to do it. But we are already doing it, and our portfolio has really grown quite significantly. Right? As at end of last year, we were about 40 billion. Right now, it's probably crossing the 50 billion mark, Sing dollar. So divide by 1.3, that's the US dollar. So I feel that the banks like us, who are very I would say committed to the cause of sustainability, we can make a difference to the real sustainability effort of the whole economy and such. Identifying the right project, funding the right amount of money into this kind of projects, make sure that we continue to track them, make sure that the end outcome is as per what is promised. So that's really the bank's role.
And from a green financing perspective, which is that core mantra of everything working within the sustainability space, that financing part is so significant. Where do you see the interest from the domestic economy here in Vietnam and from the foreign investor community here in Vietnam into accessing and developing these type of financing tools?
The interest for green financing is probably just beginning in Vietnam. This is my view, very anecdotal, because this purely from my own perspective. Because before this, it is not that the Vietnam companies they are not doing anything green. They are doing, but a lot of them are actually doing self-financing, right? They just have to bear the cost to revamp this new process, add a solar panel, or some of them are investing into the wind power projects and everything. It was already happening. It's just that there wasn't so much publicity around it. But the green financing comes in when banks like myself, when we start to publicize that we are actually here prepared to put money to you. So instead of you using your shareholders' funds or your retained profit, actually you can take a loan at quite a cheap price, and then you can continue to grow your business even faster. So that I feel is a trend that actually only happened quite recently. I would say it's probably in the last few years where we start to see, say, green financing happening for Vietnam. Case in point, like green bond, right? Green bond is one of those instruments that can reach the widest investors in the fastest way, right? But green bonds, if you look at just one Google away, you realize that Vietnam is really at a very, very nascent stage as compared to what is happening already in Indonesia, in Thailand, as well as even in Malaysia and Philippines. But Vietnam, we are way behind in terms of the green bonds market. And so that's a very interesting, that's very telling in my view, that when it comes to the green financing from FIs, from institutions, for financial, here is just like at the beginning. Yeah. But certainly when we go around talking to our customers, we realize that they are already very, very tuned to the fact that they have to be green, because the pressure actually is not coming from anybody else except that their customers or their suppliers, most likely in the Europe or in the Americas. They were expected to target,
or their investor or their direct investor.
Yeah, correct. And then for the fund house, so for the fund houses, right, when they are looking at green, they want to deploy funds for the green project. I feel that there are actually more money who wants to go into the green project than there are available green projects out there. Yeah. So it's now I would say that the liquidity in sustainability financing is actually very high. Yeah. A lot of fund houses are there. So once they sense that there are opportunities in terms of the project, the viable project, people are actually queuing up to try to fund them.
Right. Oh, that's very good news for Vietnam, especially because there is that trend, as you said, of green growth. The Vietnamese authority as well, and there's a lot of chambers of commerce and a lot of institutions that are pushing forward not just the narrative but active projects into developing green and sustainable businesses across a whole range of industries in Vietnam. Digital transformation is part of one, and then many others, agriculture and so on and so forth. Where do you see some of the roadblocks for this pivot of the Vietnamese business mindset from a private and public perspective towards green sustainability and advancing faster in these areas?
Not so much of roadblocks, actually. I find that the wind is blowing in the direction that everybody is very much aligned. Especially regulators are so supportive of the whole economy going green. They are determined. They are showing practical developments into the policies aspect of things to ensure that the economy is going green. So this part to me is very clear. Led by the regulators, 2050 is our goal. Okay, this is our power development plan, and we are into the 8th version already. So it's been refined, right? How much is green? How much is non-green? How much am I prepared to continue to burn coal? Right, brown versus the green one. I want it to grow from the current 30% to 60% to 70%. All this is already mapped out very clearly in the plans by the regulators. So I don't really see so much about roadblocks. On the contrary, I'm seeing a lot of help on the way. Where I feel is lacking, not roadblock, but it's a bit lacking, is what we call the green taxonomy. That part is really not clear yet, despite the effort by the regulators to put in place all these targets and obviously regulations to punish people who are not green. But they have not come up with a comprehensive set of green taxonomy, which is taxonomy basically is the framework where it tells this kind of activity is considered green. This kind of activity cannot be considered green. It's not like it. And if you do this, what's it going to cost you in terms of my tax? How much am I going to tax this kind of activity versus that kind of activity? So with a green taxonomy firm up, you will realize that then the investors will start to flow into the clearly identified green, the more tax-friendly projects and all, versus the less tax-friendly. That framework not clear yet. Yeah. I don't see that as a roadblock, but it is something that the regulators should continue to work hard on.
And as well from the private side, as you mentioned, the investors, the private equity firms, the VCs, majority of them, they do understand that sustainability in many scenarios create greater profits and greater sustainable growth. And they are investing predominantly and trying to figure out which are those projects that are green and sustainable.
Correct.
Do you see as well when you work with international investors such as venture capital funds or others that have a specific kind of priority dedicated into these type of investments within the green space? Do you see that in Vietnam they create the higher margins and a more solid business proposition?
There are clearly a lot of fund houses that are interested to invest into green projects in Vietnam. Okay, I think part of the reason is because these fund houses are themselves under certain kind of pressure to hit their own green target. So that's why they have to deploy so much funds that they raise towards certain green projects. And the challenge for them is, I want to find a green project that is measurable, that is attested by certain international certification bodies and all. So those funds will constantly be on the lookout. In fact, my own opinion is there are way more funds that out there that are interested to invest in green projects than what the current Vietnam economy can produce. Yeah, we just need that independent party. We just lack those independent party to be able to direct funds from these investors to the project, and then continuously assure the investors from this independent party that your funds are in good hands, it's green and all. I find it is these institutions that are lacking, and that's where the banks come in, right? And we started slightly earlier. A few other international banks, they are also very much into it quite early, but the local banks are also actively coming in. So very soon, I feel that the whole market will be a lot more vibrant when it comes to channeling funds, the right kind of funds to the right kind of projects, with confidence, in the whole system. Very soon, I think it's going to be happening.
I completely agree, and I think within this ecosystem of green growth, green financing, investors seeking these areas, Vietnam and the context of Vietnam's development within the digital economy, the digital transformation, the fintech projects that are developing, somehow you could see that they're all kind of fit together within the same narrative that splits sustainability, finance, digital space, and then moving forward towards net zero goals and transforming Vietnam's kind of foundational economy into an advanced economy, and that's where everyone wants to be at a certain stage. We're doing a project on digital transformation that we're launching this September as well, and looking into the digital economy of the Vietnam opportunity and how investors are leveraging this, starting with agri-tech, fintech, and UOB is part of that as well with your insight team, and it will be very interesting to see more projects developing in the digital space that are as well green and supporting green development and green investments.
Yeah. In terms of digitalization, this has been the mega trend that started way earlier than this sustainability trend, and a lot of funds have already flowed in to helping companies to digitalize their processes. Take UOB for example, right? And UOB, like as a typical big institutions, the customers are expecting us to be at the forefront of, say, investment into digitalization to ensure that our processes are more efficient, more user-friendly, and obviously lesser risk of mistakes as well. Scam, people want us to be the one that's helping them to protect any scam attempts. So we are almost expected to be at the forefront of investment into digitalization, and we have been, right? So I was just getting some statistics, and I realized that we have actually spent almost 800 million Sing dollar over the past 8 years. That's 8 years, 800 million. It sounds like a lot, but what's going to happen in the next 3 years is it really blows my mind. We have budgeted 2 billion Sing dollar to be spent over the next 3 years to invest even further into the technology space. Yeah, to ensure that we continue to be on trend, right, in terms of generative AI, right, how AI can be used for productivity as well as to avoid risk, customer experience, connectivity, right. We are already at a stage where our corporate customers who are using our UOB Infinity in the 5 major ASEAN markets, the single app can already allow the same customer to see all their balances, across these five markets. We're already at this stage, just on a single app, and I'm sure more innovative solutions will be coming out. So coming to your point about you are also very much into the fintech, agri-tech, so so all these investments in technology will continue alongside the sustainability investments. It's going to be totally.
Thank you for sharing, and we're slowly getting to the end of the conversation. And I'd like to, before saying thank you to our viewers and yourself, to kind of do a wrap up of the discussion to understand a bit, looking ahead towards 2025. In your view, how do you see Vietnam in the regional investment landscape and that positioning from that sustainable journey and green growth? What's your expectation in the next few years? A pivot towards a solid advancement into several areas, or kind of a moderate approach towards a maturity level?
The sustainability train has started for Vietnam, that's for sure. Okay, perhaps a little bit slower than maybe some of the advanced economies are doing, but definitely this train has started. And the way I look at it in terms of the political will to make sure it's successful, as well as the amount of money that's available out there in the market from around the world that's prepared to come in, I just feel that it's a very positive story for Vietnam economy in terms of sustainability, and sustainability. To be more exact, right? We actually should be looking at all 3 aspects of the 3P. There is that planet aspect, which a lot of time we talk about sustainability is on this aspect only, climate change. But actually, there's 2 other aspects, which is the people aspect as well as the social, the profit aspect.
Yeah.
Right. Profit is basically the corporates. So you have to take care of the corporates, you have to take care of people, and then obviously, and it comes to, so that is to be more holistically come under the ESG story, right? So many a time now we're talking about sustainability. ESG is almost an interchangeable word, but I personally feel that sustainability is the scope is growing from into all angles. But if we were to sit down and say which are the key aspects that we should look at, is actually the E, the S, and the G, right? And it makes things a lot more organized in terms of where you want to put your money. Is it towards the planet part? Is it towards the people part? Because the big buyers in Europe, right? They are all looking at the suppliers in Vietnam and say that, are you taking care of people? I was visiting the factory, the government factory, and I saw the thousands of workers standing up and doing some kind of exercise. It's a 5-minute mandatory break as part of the ESG undertaking that they are doing, mandated by their MNC buyer in Europe. So that's where we are now. I seriously feel that it's a very positive story, and I'm very, very happy that I have the chance to participate in this Vietnam story.
DC, thank you so much for participating at our Acclime Conversation series. Hopefully we'll have you back next year on another topic and another growth story for our investors.
Thank you for the opportunity.
And thank you so much for the viewers. We look forward to welcoming you to other conversations about the most pressing matters that are relevant for international investors in Vietnam. Stay tuned for our next episodes. Thank you.